Alright, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jake. This is Spencer. You already know us, the introduction. This is Tana. That's Danielle. We're going again. Today we'll be talking about voter ID laws. They're a fabulous thing, really. Voter ID laws, basically, there's a lot of fraud going around voter IDs. And so, the idea behind this law is that, so when people go to vote, instead of just writing in information and filling out papers, they have to present a valid picture ID so we know who they are and we can verify, maybe even scan them in. So the process goes quicker, we know who everybody is, there's no questions, it's perfect. So, voter ID, according to protectmyvote.com, voter fraud is generally only detected after the fact. So it's like people will go in and vote fraudulently, and then weeks later we're like, hold on, something's not right here. And at that point it's too expensive and it takes a lot of time to solve the problem. So the idea behind voter ID laws is to just cut that time and cost and just get it out of the way, right? Like stop it before it's a problem. Also, according to the statesman.com, in a recent poll, an overwhelming 75% of voters, registered voters, said that Americans should present voter ID laws. So it's not like there's a minority that's saying, hey, we need to have voter ID laws or bad things are going to happen. It's a 3/4 of America, so I feel like that's a good sample size. In September, or that's old information, an analysis by Reuters and research from the firm IPSOS of data, they pulled data from 20,000 voter interviews, and they found that those lacking voter ID were actually less likely to vote anyway, regardless of whether the law changed or not. So basically, just because now they have to have IDs, that doesn't change anything. Even if they already had the IDs, they weren't really just gonna, just because they don't need the IDs doesn't mean they're gonna vote anyway. According to that same information, among those who said they were certain to vote, only 1% did not have the proper ID, while another 1% said they were uncertain whether they had the proper ID. So people who are motivated about voting have made sure that they do need they have the proper paperwork that's needed, or a proper photo ID. In my next point, some would say that there's not much fraud going on, but there is quite a bit of fraud, so this is a pretty important subject. Former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens has said that flagrant examples of voter fraud have been documented throughout this nation's history by respected historians, journalists, and this demonstrates that not only is the risk of voter fraud real, but that it could strongly affect a close election. Another example of voter fraud to prove that it's real is in Tunica County, Mississippi. Don't know if that's right. A member of the NAACP's local executive committee, who was sentenced to 5 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for voting under 10 different names, and 4 of those 10 names were dead people. So, if that's happening, if one man can fake 10 votes, imagine what 10 people could do. That's 100 votes. So this can snowball. It can get really big. That's not important. An interesting quote from Forbes I read was that shoplifters only get caught 1 in 50 times, and there's big firms that are dedicated to preventing shoplifting. But with something as important as our nation's voting, there's not really any big method to stop it. And if shoplifters get caught 1 in 50 times, who's to say voter ID fraud or voting fraud is only getting caught 1 in 100 times, 1 in 1,000 times, 1 in 5 times, who knows? So there's just a lot we can't take into account all the evidence that there may be. Thank you, that is my first speech.